This is Fabiola, and this is Sabre Slash version 2.0, your go-to for everything Sabre Nation. Our main topic this episode will be taking a look at our history and exploring the story of Sumner High School and Spartanland. This episode we will summarize the history of Sumner High. We have an interview with Dr. Gary Andersen, who was a teacher at Sumner High 45 years ago, the last semester of the Spartans. Finally, we will discover John McLendon, a Sumner High graduate who evolved and helped integrate the sport of basketball in a major way. This is the rich legacy of the Spartans passed to us Sabres.
The Wyandotte County community of Quindaro began its decline in 1863. It had an impact on the development of Wyandotte County in terms of demographics. Located on the south bank of the Missouri River in what it is now Kansas City, where Interstate 635 crosses the river, Quindaro was developed after the Kansas-Nebraska Act to create a free state part of entry into Kansas territory. Because it was close to the Missouri River, Quindaro was an ideal location for helping slaves move to freedom. After the war, several free African-American slaves moved to Quindaro and other Kansas River towns. Freedmen's University, later chartered as Western University, was established and its buildings were erected on a bluff west of Old Quindaro. After the Civil War in 1879, the Kansas legislature passed a law stating in Class A cities, population of 10,000 or more, all secondary schools must be integrated. In 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson passed the Supreme Court establishing a federal standard, separate but equal. Kansas had a reputation as a free state.
Jim Crow
Laws are historically understated, but there were areas where they were in place. During and following Reconstruction, Kansas City, Kansas had a population surge. Kansas City, Kansas High School, which had been established in the 1890s, was integrated, as well as the middle school. In 1904, a white popular high school student, Roy Martin, was shot by a black 18-year-old worker, Louise Gregory. The incident was unrelated to the high school, and several black community members did a vigil around the jail to protect Gregory from any potential lynch mob. The day after his arrest, April 14, 1905, white students at the Kansas City, Kansas High School prevented black students from entering the school. The superintendent of the school, Emmy Pearson, did nothing to enforce discipline in these students, and eventually the school ended closing from Friday to Monday. Time after all this, there was a voting to change the school system and once again have segregated schools. People voted for that system, and a bill was passed by Edward W. Hoach. For a year, the middle school and high school segregated without incident by time, morning classes and afternoon classes, citing an increase in the racial tension in the area and a suspect petition. An exception to Kansas 1879 law for Kansas City, Kansas was set into motion. The new school was given the name Manual Training High School. However, its name and intent garnered a lot of distaste from the black community. Said distaste led to a meeting of members of the Board of Education, ministers, teachers, and attorneys to be held in order for the school to be renamed. In the end, the name was dropped and the school took the name Sumner High School after Charles Sumner, an abolitionist and a U.S. Senate member from 1851 to 1874 by the Board of Education. Sumner High School opened in 1906 at the corner of Washington and 9th Streets. Within this new school, the majority of the faculty working there had advanced degrees. With this in mind, Sumner was able to quickly gain recognition as one of the best schools in the state, able to make a name for itself not only due for their high school educated staff, but also because of their academic excellence and extracurricular activities. The school itself even hosted an annual Ambition Day, which was when they encouraged students to dress as a profession they desired to be part of.
The school itself had a capacity of about 300 students. This proved to be rather complicated later on as more African Americans were moving to Kansas City from the South. Due to this, 4 rooms were added to the building in 1908, with a gym being added later in 1924. From 1906 to 1938, the original high school's colors were black and gold. Black represented the founding of the school for the Black community, and the gold represented the hope that the school would reach golden heights. However, this still proved to be ineffective, and the building facilities were still not enough. Administrators later took advantage of the Public Works Administration program, a plan made to decrease unemployment and help out during the Great Depression in the 1930s in order to build a new school. Sumner High School gained a huge amount of success and support from its community and became a staple to the community and its importance. On May 17, 1954, U.S. Supreme Court Justice Earl Warren delivered the unanimous ruling in the landmark civil rights case Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. State-sanctioned segregation of public schools was a violation of the 14th Amendment and was therefore unconstitutional. This historic decision marked the end of the separate but equal precedent set by the Supreme Court nearly 60 years earlier in Plessy v. Ferguson, and served as a catalyst for the expanding civil rights movement during the decade of 1950s. Sumner's main successes come from the studies of science and performing arts such as band. Most of their successes came from the band winning the International Jazz Festival competition in Paris, France in 1972. Band leader Leon Brady got funding support from the community members to take the band to this international competition, the prize including music theory lessons in England. At the Greater Kansas City Science Fair, Sumner High won first place for 6 consecutive years. They changed the mascot of the school from the Jayhawkers to the Spartans after the new building with Art Deco features and a tower was opened in 1940. The colors of orange and black were then adopted. Having a prestigious reputation, the school was a magnet for influential people in the African American community to come and give speeches at the school, such as Martin Luther King Jr., who spoke on behalf of the NAACP in June of 1958. Martin visited Sumner High School and gave a speech. He encouraged the Black citizens to hate segregation and injustice, but to not hate the segregationists. In addition to this speech, he stated that they must not use violence to achieve integration because they will cause bitterness for generations to come. Jesse Jackson also spoke in the New Gym in 1977, bringing a positive message of hope to a community in the midst of significant change as a federal busing mandate that also impacted Kansas City, Missouri. Despite their massive successes and high reputation, a federal busing mandate made integration inevitable. The resolution of this issue was given to the district. The plan for closing the school was put to a vote. Jared Hall, a Sumner alumni and sole Black member of the school board and president of the school board, knew how badly this would affect an entire community and how it would change everyone's lives in the community. He was the sole dissenting vote. Up to and during the 70s, race relations in the Kansas City, Kansas areas did not provide the most diverse learning experience or opportunities for the shared communities. Dr. Gary Andersen, who 45 years ago was a teacher during the final years of Sumner High School, shares what the community of the Douglas-Sumner area was like and how he was able to navigate the slow introduction of integration into the area. Dr. Andersen also details what life was like in Spartanland from a teacher's perspective and what the ripple effect of the creation of Sumner Academy had on the community that surrounded and embraced Sumner High.
I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Jamal Hicks Jr., senior at Sumner Academy.
My name is Javier Condi, also a senior at Sumner Academy. And today we just have a few questions for you. Would you like to introduce yourself?
You bet. I'm Gary Andersen. I am longtime former teacher at Sumner High School, 1977-78. I'm currently the coordinator of the Transition to Teaching program out of Fort Hays State University and associate professor there. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. How did you get into teaching? And could you describe your community environment before you got into teaching?
I was initially interested in being a forest ranger. I love biology and the sciences. Went to K-State. I got married early in life, and I at some point along the way, I just decided, you know what? I think I like to work with people and make an impact on people as well as being in the natural environment. So I switched my major, became in biology education, and upon graduation, I started looking for jobs. I grew up in the Shawnee Mission area. So my entrance into Sumner was quite a awakening for me. It was, it was an all African American school, as you know, and it was the first time that I had been in a cultural situation like that. So I had a lot to learn, and it was a great 2 years that I spent there before it was closed.
Can you describe the how the community was at Sumner High School? How did the community and the surroundings look like?
At Sumner Academy High School. Yeah.
So at the time, the school itself was wonderful. We had great staff there. The principal was James Body, and he was a great leader, I thought. He was there for a couple of years while I was there, and then I'm not sure what happened to him. I think he's now passed away, but he was a good leader. We had strong teachers, strong assistant principals. They all loved kids and worked with the students well. The student body was a great student body. We had, a lot of high poverty. The community did suffer from poverty, no doubt about it, but they were intensely, for the most part, they were students that wanted to learn and were a good group to work with. We also, as you might know, in situations of poverty, we had troubled students like any other school. But it was a great experience, and I feel like for being my first time teaching, it was probably the most valuable place I could have gone. It was a close-knit community. I think everybody took a lot of pride in the school. People in the community took pride in Sumner. I didn't have anything to say about how that got resolved. It was, I don't know that I can come up with a better idea, but I felt like the community was, it was a result of racism, and it was a result of decades and decades of this is how it is, and it had to change because of a court order. And unfortunately, I think it kind of got put on the backs of the African American community there instead of maybe a more widespread solution. But it is what it is, and here we are today. But yeah, overall, I'd say I would describe the community as a community full of pride in their school.
I realized that Brown versus Boyle was passed in 1954. Do you know what took Sumner so long to integrate?
That's a great question. I think, we had a majority white community at the time. I think, honestly, probably for some of those years, it was just racism. Just, the two communities were separate. My father grew up in Kansas City, Kansas, and he lived near 17th and Quindaro as a kid. And that neighborhood, I'm not sure when it transitioned. There was white flight. I don't think race relations were really great in Kansas City, Kansas, for years. And my dad grew up with that. I think I saw him evolve over the years. I saw him change a lot. He was kind of a tough kid, a street fighter kind of guy. He joined the Marines. But in his later years, I saw him take public stands for some African Americans in our world that were being mistreated, I felt like, or ignored, or those kind of things. And I gotta say, he evolved. I don't think I have a very perfect family when it comes to race relations, but we evolved and things change. Well, I think Sumner came about, if you've read the history, it came about as a result of some violence in the early 1900s. And so I think people were like, okay, well, that's the way it is, and that's the way it ought to be, and we'll just keep things separate, and we'll have peace that way. We won't have any more violence. How'd that work out for you all? I don't know. I don't think so. I think by the 50s and the 60s, it was becoming unbearable. And of course, the court ordered that Sumner would be integrated. And, I think the idea was at that point, how are we going to do this? How are we going to get white folk to come down to the hood, essentially. How are we going to get black kids to go to the other schools? They were already there at that time. The problem was Sumner, and Sumner was designated, originally as kind of an all African American school. Now, the faculty was mixed, probably more white than black. So that was troubling because the faculty didn't match the student body. I don't know how it is now. You guys do, I guess. We had a great bunch of faculty, despite that. And, I think they were just letting things slide. They were just letting things slide for years and years until the federal government stepped in and said, no, you can't have a school that's just only African Americans. You got to integrate. And I realized that's a sticky problem. How do you get people that are in segregated neighborhoods to mix into schools? I don't know that I would have a great solution, but I guess I wish they would have thought about it a little more. And I don't want to disparage Sumner Academy in any way. I think it's a great school, and maybe it's what had to happen, but I just felt like, okay, what you're telling the African American community is that their school is going to be destroyed. And they had to figure out how do you attract a diverse group to the school? So they made it, that you applied for it, and it was prestigious, and it's gotten many awards as one of the best, if not the best school in Kansas. So, that part turned out great. I'm not sure from the African American community that was there what they thought. I think they probably missed their school, and you got to understand that. I do. It was a source of pride. I know many of the teachers that went there. Bill Boone was a great science teacher that taught at Sumner, and when I had to go to Schlegel because of the transfer and the closing of the school, Bill Boone was the assistant principal at Schlegel. And he was very proud of his students and the efforts and achievements they made in the Greater Kansas City Science Fair. So I when I talked to people that were teachers or went there as students, I get this sense of, we were a good school, we were a great school, we did great things. And that's what I mean. There was a sense of pride in the school, in the community. And that's the part that kind of disturbed me, that what do you do with that when you totally remake the school? It was a bit sad.
So, what did you personally predict would happen to Sumner after being closed and being integrated?
Oh, I don't know that I had a great prediction, but I think the thing that I heard from lots of people, and I kind of wondered myself, was, okay, you're taking select students, basically leadership, from the other 4 high schools, and then concentrating them at Sumner. And I think the big question was, what's that do to the other 4 high schools? If you select through testing the best students, you pull them out of the high school that they would have gone to, what does that do? And I don't know that I have an answer to that. Obviously, it probably did remove some of the student leadership and that kind of thing. But that was another troubling piece. And all these are very sticky, hard to solve problems. And it's like, you had to do something because the federal government ordered it. And what are you going to do to solve 70 years of this problem? And so they made a decision. Now, most of the board there, I think at the time there was 1 or 2 African Americans on the school board, but honestly, most of the superintendent was white, and so was most of the school board members. So you probably got a decision that was based on the majority viewpoint in the school board and in the administration.
How did integration in surrounding areas affect the community around Sumner? Like, were there any like demographic shifts?
I think it did accomplish sort of mixing and the school setting. I taught in the school system, and also I became the science coordinator for Kansas City, Kansas public schools. And so I was in the school system for 34 years. And so, yeah, I got to say, over the years, I think there was more integration achieved. Now, did that result in better race relations? Possibly. I think there was a bigger change that maybe dwarfed the integration of African Americans and whites, and that was the influx of immigrants. So now Kansas City, Kansas has an enormous, immigrant population from Hispanic countries and Southeast Asia. This is right after the Vietnam War, so people were leaving Vietnam and Laos and places like that to flee the war stuff that was going on in the early 70s. By 1978, I think the sort of focus on African American and white populations was kind of declining, and this sort of new waves of immigration changed the face of Kansas City, Kansas much more than that historical conflict or problem that was there from the 1900 to 1978. So yeah, I think it helped a bit in integrating, but honestly, I think people chose where they wanted to live.
Yeah.
And that's the big, if you're going to really accomplish integration, schools help. But when people choose where they want to live, there was things like white flight. People left, where my dad used to live, and they moved out to the western part of the county. So it's complicated. It's not, you can't just make one simple, draw a parallel line and say this is exactly what happened, I don't think. And it's got one cause. There's a whole lot going on.
By having these experiences as a teacher, were there any events or lessons that you took from it and applied to your own life?
I think one lesson is be willing to learn, be open to different ways of thinking. Like I said, when I first started, when you see those pictures of me in the school, I was 23 years old, and honestly, I was pretty uninformed about a lot of. Anyway, I think what I learned is be open to how other people think, how other people live and behave. And, I noticed even in the 2 years when I was there, some of my mannerisms changed. I started, honestly, the kids rubbed off on me. I started talking a little more like the kids did, We had lots of things that made an impact on me. Jesse Jackson came and visited in 1977. So he spoke. It was the first time I'd ever heard the Black national anthem. I didn't even know what that was, And so I was getting all these experiences that I was like, what's that? What's that? I was learning. And I think the thing that I've taken away is just become a learner and be curious and try to learn about other people and their perspectives, and don't just come into life with your own perspective and think that's the way it is and the way it should be necessarily.
Do you remember what Jesse Jackson was talking about?
Jesse said a lot, and it's so many years ago. I do remember the cadence he had. I think you can see it in the yearbook at the beginning of the yearbook. Those quotes in the beginning of the yearbook are his. So things like, it's not your aptitude, but your attitude that determines your altitude. He was very inspiring with his words. Nobody can save us, from us, for us, but us. He was really speaking to that community and trying to inspire them. Now, at the same time, another kind of thing I remember, have you guys ever seen the TV series Roots?
No, I've
No.
heard about it and I've watched the
Mhm.
movie before.
An author and ultimately a TV producer, Alex Haley. He produced a mini series on TV called Roots, and it traced the life of a family from Africa as they were sold into slavery, and the main character was Kunta Kinte.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting series to watch, and it was on TV. And I can't remember the year. It was either 77 or 78, but I remember that stirred up the African American community a lot. And it was very emotional, to watch, and emotional for them. I remember students coming to school and marching and up and down the halls shouting, Kunta Kinte, and stuff like that. And it was a sign of the times. I mean, you got to realize this was just 8 years, 9 years from Martin Luther King's assassination in 68. So I guess 10 years, but all that was pretty fresh back then. And so this TV series was a very emotional touch point for the community, and it struck some nerves. And it depicted slavery, it depicted racism, it depicted things in ways that hadn't been done before. I encourage you to watch it if you can. I think you can probably find it on YouTube these days. But I will say several, if not many, of the African American teachers that were there at the time were also students at that school. So I think that shows that they were kind of coming back to serve in their community, which is a great thing.
Did you make it to a lot of basketball games?
Yeah, I went to quite a few. Mm-hmm.
How would you say the environment was in there?
It was exciting. It was electric. We would go, on the road or in the home games. Of course, it was kind of I don't know, Sumner's got that there's a new gym and an old gym. So, they had the new gym at the time. And it was densely packed in there, and people were yelling, and it was pretty darn exciting. Well, I certainly wish you all the best in your journalistic and also your athletic endeavors. And it has been a pleasure to talk to you, and have a great rest of the year.
John McLendon Jr. is recognized as an ambassador in the field of athletics, the inventor of basketball's fast break, and as a civil rights pioneer. Coach Mac, as he was affectionately known, as the person responsible for the integration of college basketball. John McLendon was born April 5, 1915, in Hiawatha, Kansas. McLendon's family then moved to Kansas City. He went to Sumner High School, graduating in 1934. He was an all-around athlete and chose basketball as his favorite sport, although he failed to make the basketball team at Sumner. Instead, he lettered in gymnastics and was the basketball team manager. After high school, he attended Kansas City, Kansas Junior College, which is now known as Kansas City, Kansas Community College, for 1 year, where he finally made the undefeated basketball team. When McLendon transferred to KU, it was at the same time as Canadian import James Naismith, inventor of basketball, was teaching there. Naismith asked McLendon why he had come to KU. McLendon responded that his father found out that Naismith was there, so he sent him there. Naismith replied, "Fathers are always right." Throughout McLendon's time at KU, he and Naismith developed a mentee/mentor relationship that encompassed life on and off the court. In James Naismith, McLendon found a staunch ally in the personal and professional battles he would fight at KU. The battlefield was often Robinson Gymnasium, where McLendon was rebuffed in his attempts to join the basketball team, but successful in his determination to integrate the university's swimming pool. One afternoon, he showed up at the segregated pool in the basement of Robinson Gymnasium and jumped in. Afterwards, the manager drained the pool. When McLendon showed up the next day, the manager drained it again and then called in help from administration. While other PE students could swim whenever, McLendon was informed that he could only swim on Friday afternoons. Once a week, he swam alone, and afterward, the manager drained the pool. McLendon went on to integrate the pool by taking proactive steps and then speaking to Fog Allen. While still a student at KU, James Naismith ensured McLendon could practice teaching and coaching as a coach of Lawrence High School's all-black basketball team, which he led to a state championship. He graduated from the University of Kansas in 1937 as the first African-American student to earn a degree in physical education. He went on to become a successful high school teacher and college coach at schools such as North Carolina Central University, Hampton Institute, Tennessee A&I, Kentucky State College, and Cleveland State University. In his early years, his teams were restricted to playing only against all black teams. However, while coaching at North Carolina Central College, McLendon participated in the Secret Game, a match against a team from Duke University. He led the Eagles to 8 CIA championships. McLendon's teams were credited with increasing the pace of the game of basketball from the slow tempo of its early years to the faster tempo that prevails today. At Cleveland State, he was the first African-American head coach of a predominantly white university. He was a 3-time winner of the NAIA Coach of the Year award and won 3 consecutive NAIA championships at Tennessee State, making him the first college basketball coach ever to have won 3 consecutive national titles. McLendon also coached professionally on 2 occasions. Cleveland Pipers general manager Mike Cleary hired him in 1962 to be the head coach of the American Basketball League team, which was owned by George Steinbrenner. McLendon's hiring made history as he became the first African-American head coach in professional sports. In his and the Pipers' only season in the ABL, partway through the season he quit or was fired. McLendon was replaced as a coach by Bill Sharman of the recently defunct Los Angeles Jets of the ABL. Under Sharman, the team completed the season and won the league championship. McLendon went on to coach the American Basketball Association's Denver Rockets, which later became the Denver Nuggets of the NBA, in 1969, although he was fired after the team started the season 9-19. Despite the fact that he was only 54 when he was dismissed, this was the last college or professional head coaching job in his career. McLendon's contribution to the game of basketball include the invention of the fast break, full court press, and 4 corners offense. Like Naismith, McLendon was inducted into the Naismith F. Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame in 1979 as a contributor. He was, however, selected in 2007 for the second entering class of the National Collegiate Basketball Hall of Fame for his coaching achievements. He was also inducted into the Cleveland State Athletics Hall of Fame in 2007, where his wife Joanna accepted the award on his behalf. On April 4, 2016, McLendon was announced as an inductee of the Naismith Hall again, this time as a coach. He was formally inducted on this role September 9th of this year.
On March 12, 1944, a group of North Carolina basketball players piled into a car, getting ready for a game with the confidence of being the best players in the North Carolina state. The Duke members were on their way to a game not knowing where or who their opponents were. The drivers drove around the North Carolina streets to ensure they weren't being followed. When they crossed town, the players covered their windows with quilts to be hidden. When the players walked in the gymnasium, they encountered a timekeeper, 2 referees, and the starting 5 of the North Carolina College Negroes, coached by the young John McLendon. Segregation prohibited interracial games, but that rule was going to be broken on that day. John McLendon believed basketball could change prejudice. Duke players used their college experience to get ahead of the Eagles. The Eagles applied pressure defense and drew outlet passes, attacking the basket aggressively, which is known as a fast break. This was a style of basketball white players never seen before. The Duke players couldn't keep up with the pace of the Eagles and were worn out quickly, while the Eagles made basketball after basket after basket because of the great conditioning they were in. Duke lost with 44 points and the Eagles won with 88 points. Both teams played again, but this time players switched teams and played a game with shirts and skins, a remarkable moment. Students found out about the illegal basketball game. Eagle players invited the Duke players over to their dorms and talked about basketball. The players kept a secret to keep each other safe, especially John McLendon. The KKK considered race mixing a punishment of death. 22 years later, the segregated basketball era was ending. John McLendon believed everyone can play together.